Hi, how are you? Today I am reviewing Sony A7 III review. 2-minute review. Key features. Just like its predecessors, the A7 II and the A7, the A7 III has a 24MP sensor. Resolution is probably the first thing camera buyers look for, and it's perhaps this camera's most unremarkable specification. It's not the same sensor as before, however. This one has a back-illuminated design for improved light gathering, and is teamed up with a front-end ILCE7M3B X processor that produce much faster data readout and processing speeds than before. One criticism of previous models is that once the buffer is filled you can't use the camera menus until it's cleared, but Sony has fixed that with the A7 III. You may also find that the viewfinder image at 10 fps isn't quite responsive enough for following fast or erratic subjects, but there's an 8 fps live view mode that offers a faster, more stable viewfinder image. Verdict. The A7 III hardly puts a foot wrong. Its specifications make it a terrific all-rounder, one that's so powerful that its price is actually a bit of a surprise. Its handling and control layout aren't perfect. Fans might disagree, but that's soon forgotten in the face of its autofocus and continuous shooting performance, not to mention its 4K video capabilities. The 24MP resolution might put a few people off. We've been spoiled recently by a slew of higher-resolution full-frame cameras like the Canon EOS 5DS, Nikon D850 and Sony's own A7R III. Even the Pentax K1 Mark II beats the A7 III. With its 36.4MP sensor. The A7 III feels a lot like the A7 II and A7R III in the hand. It measures 3.9 by 5.0 by 2.5 inches, HWD, without a lens, and weighs about 1.4 pounds. Its grip and body design are the same as you get with the A7R III. I find it quite comfortable to hold, even with a larger zoom like the FE 100 to 400 mm. The body is protected against dust and splashes, as are all Sony FE lenses. If you've held a Sony Alpha camera, you probably have noticed that they tend to follow a very similar design path. Even when they are different, like the subtle body changes to the A9, the general aesthetic is the same. Holding the A7 III feels exactly like holding the A7R III, because they are exactly the same. From a body design perspective, it is impossible to visually tell the A7R III and the A7 III apart aside from the model number on the front and back of the camera. Power and connectivity. The A7 III uses the Z battery, introduced in the A9 and also used by the A7R III. It's good for 710 shots per CP ratings with the A7 III, as its power requirements are less than the A9 or A7R III, both rated for 650 images per charge. The bigger battery is a boon to enthusiasts who don't want to buy a ton of spares, and pros alike. A grip is available. It allows the camera to use 2 batteries, effectively doubling its life. You won't have to worry about running out of power when shooting a wedding, for example. Performance and autofocus. The A7 III starts, focuses, and fires in about 2.2 seconds. That's one area where it's slower than competing SLRs, like the Canon EOS 6D Mark II, 0.4 second, and Nikon D750, 0.4 second. Its autofocus system is quite speedy, locking on in 0.05 second in bright light and an average of 0.4 second in very dim conditions. I tested the burst speed using a Lexar 300 Mbps memory card in the UHS-2 slot. The camera manages 10 fps in its fastest burst mode. The amount of shots you can take before the camera stalls varies based on the file format you use. I tested uncompressed RAW and extra fine JPG, 34 shots, compressed RAW and extra fine JPG, 78 shots, uncompressed RAW, 37 shots, compressed RAW, 103 shots, and extra fine JPG, 164 shots. Recovery time, the duration it takes for the buffer to fully clear to the memory card, varies based on file format. If you're shooting RAW plus JPG, either format, expect to wait about 24 seconds, but only about 14 seconds for RAW alone. Image quality. The A7 III uses a new sensor, one that is similar in design to the 24MP sensor used by the A9, but not identical. The A9 sensor is a stacked design, which puts memory right on the chip in order to deliver instant readout and its 20 fps capture capability. The A7 III doesn't do that. It is a BSI backside illumination design, like the A9 and high-resolution A7R III. This type of sensor cuts the distance between its surface and light-sensitive area. The practical effect is that you get superior high ISO quality compared with sensors that put circuitry in front of the light-gathering area rather than behind it. Moving to the extreme ranges of the ISO range, the camera can shoot as high as ISO 200-4800, is a bit much for JPG shooters. You can get usable, albeit soft, results at ISO 51200. There's quite a bit of blur at ISO 100-2400, though I can still make out some detail in our test images. The ISO 200-4800 setting delivers blurry results, but that's to be expected when shooting at such an extreme. Performance. Technically, the Sony A7 III is a dream on paper, but the proof is in the shooting. Let's start with autofocus. The A7 III can fire bursts for a long time at high speeds, 10 fps for up to 9 seconds in compressed RAW mode, but that doesn't do you much good if the focus can't keep up. The new model has 693 phase detection points and 425 for contrast detection, a huge increase over the 117 25-point phase detect/contrast detect F system on the A7 II. The A7 III, however, captures 4K video at 24 fps from the entire 24.2 megapixel, 6K, sensor, oversampling to 3840 by 2160, exactly like the much more expensive A9. When you shoot at 30 fps, it takes a mild 1.2x crop, producing slightly less detailed footage with slightly enlarged depth of field. If you want to punch in more, you can also shoot with an APS-C portion of the sensor, a 1.5x crop. Sony A7 III specifications. Sensor, 24.2 MP CMOS sensor, 5.93 micropixel size. Sensor size, 36 by 24 mm. Resolution, 6000 by 4000. Native ISO sensitivity, 100 to 51200. Boost ISO sensitivity, 50 to 204,800. In-body image stabilization, yes. RAW formats, RAW, 14-bit ARW, see RAW. Dust reduction, yes. Weather sealing/protection, yes. Body build, full magnesium alloy. Shutter, 1/8000th to 30 seconds. Shutter durability, unknown. Storage, 2x SD/SDHC/SDXC slot. Viewfinder, XGA OLED electronic viewfinder. Viewfinder coverage, 100%. Viewfinder magnification, 0.78x. Built-in flash, no. Autofocus system, 693 points, phase detection F, 425 points, contrast detection F. LCD screen, 921,600 dots. Wi-Fi, built-in. Bluetooth, built-in. Battery type, MPFZ100. Battery life, 610 shots, viewfinder, 710 shots, rear LCD. Viewfinder. The A7 III uses the same XGA 2,359K.1024x768 OLED electronic viewfinder as the Sony A7 II. The EVF is a definite step back from the Quad VGA 3,686K. Panel, 1280x960 pixel, found on the A7R III and A9. The viewfinder magnification does, however, get an increase to 0.78x compared to the 0.71x magnification found the A7 II's EVF. In use, the EVF is quite good, though you can notice slight pixelation if you try to look for it. Like the A7R III and unlike the A9, The A7 III's viewfinder offers a live view with blackouts up to 8 fps, while at 10 fps you're limited to a slideshow of images as they're being taken rather than a live feed. Conclusions. The Sony A7 III looks a lot like the A7 II, but the upgrades inside are palpable. Its sensor offers the same resolution, but the BSI design improves high ISO performance. The autofocus system is vastly improved, with much wider coverage and 10 fps capture. And a high-capacity battery keeps the camera shooting for much longer than previous A7 models, all while making few changes to the compact, sturdy body. The A7 III is a lot more camera than we're used to seeing at this price point. Instead of cutting out features to push buyers to a higher-end model, the A7 III inherits a lot of tech from the A9 and A7R III. We're used to seeing features from high-end options trickle down to more affordable camera over a period of years, but the A9 has only been on the market for about a year and the A7R III for about half that duration. Wrap up. The Sony Alpha A7 III might not have the highest resolution, fastest shooting speed or best video quality. But by borrowing features from the flagship A9 and A7R III, it's uniformly excellent at everything. My complaints are minor. The EVF and rear display fall short of similarly priced rivals, video quality is limited to 8-bit and 4:2:0 internal recording, and it's not quite as rugged and weatherproof as other cameras in this price category. The A7 III is occasionally complicated to use, and the Play Memories smartphone app still needs an overhaul. Finally, as with the entire A7 series, most compatible full-frame lenses are expensive. So I highly recommend getting the Sony A7 III review. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe my RS product review channel. Thank you.